My name is Andrea Giacomelli, and I'm the facilitator for production and industrial facilities, which you see here portrayed in the easiest categories, things like industrial plants, not only like a refinery or chemistry, but also in principle tied to agricultural production. Any processing of food will fall under production and industrial facilities. And the other key element, which is indicated in the definition by the directive as part of the theme, is also things like antennas or communication sites, not the networks, but the actual point sites which produce energy or communication, etc. Just in a nutshell, I would like to go through three things: the thematic working group and the activity which led us here, the data specification itself, and a few brief conclusions. On the group. So this is the group at work some time ago, but then I didn't have the latest pictures at hand. By the way, there is a poster in the poster session with things from all the groups. So there's myself, one of the experts, Antonello Navarreta from CSI Piemonte, Claudia Pegoraro, who has been our editor starting from last year, not from the beginning, also from CSI Piemonte. Angel Lopez is the JRC contact point and was serving also as the editor in the first year, and Heinrich Gerling, who is an architect based close to Köln, and he's taking the picture, so we don't have him right there. In terms of a rough common activity log, this gives you an idea of the meetings. We had 6, and with the kickoff in mid-May 2010, and then proceeding as a function of the, say, roadmap, and then various joint teleconferences, some of which also involving other groups in a couple of occasions. One thing I wanted to mention is the interactions we had in addition to what is the standard data specification process, in the sense of having initial input by JRC, collecting the input of the sticks or the comments during the versions. We tried to communicate also to other actors during this couple of years, and this gives you an idea of what happened. So we had a chance of being contacted last year together with other groups by Thomas Mildorf of the Plan for All project, which was presented also last year. And they were doing some kind of a pre-specification modeling, and they asked us to check how their data models were of use to our activity, since they came first. We had some interactions with this Impel group, which is related to waste sites, with CTGML working group, which is related in principle not directly to industry, but has some links to the European Maritime Safety Agency, Regione Toscana, the Facility Management Associations, ESA, which is another EU group, which is active on vocabularies for different types of applications. Last but not least, we also had the chance of sharing ideas with actual industry, so asking them what they thought about this and ideas. About the data specification. So in terms of scope, this figure was showed also by Frederic before, and just to tune into the industrial part of this, this shows, let's say, on the vertical scale, we see basically level of detail. We move from the lowest level of details, which is really nuts and bolts in principle for plants, and go up to a regional view of the world, the geography. So in terms of where production and facilities stand in terms of theme, it's roughly in the middle part. And basically where we are cutting the scope is on the higher detail side. Whatever looks like facility management, actual maintenance, operations is not something we want to deal with. And there may be, for certain parts of this, EF or buildings which may handle part of that content, and part will just remain out of the general scope. Going up and sort of generalize, from a higher view, our facilities become points on the map. And if we go above that level, we start seeing things like land use, land cover, where we have possibility of identifying industrial categories. And also the other part would be, in our view, area management. If you think of the cases of very large industrial complexes. In Italy, we have the so-called siti di interesse nazionale. These are very large sites which encompass a large amount of dangerous industries. That would be something which is not strictly our scope, and that's kind of the upper link. On the right side, I'm listing the main feature classes we're using, and I will discuss them in a second. Anyway, say they reflect the installation part would be the most detailed one, and the site is the most general one. As also Frederick was mentioning, we have this activity complex, which was the result of almost 1 year of negotiations between utilities, agricultural facilities, and production and industrial facilities to say we all have facilities, we all have places where people work independently of the type of activity, and this should be treated as a single, should be harmonized, and can then be specialized for the different teams. So the core model is here, and we don't need to read these individual attributes, but as I was saying, at the highest level we have this production site which is encompassing potentially more factories, let's say. This could be an industrial park as a perimeter, and this can still be identified for specific purposes. Below this we go into the actual production facility, which is what I would recognize as something which has a fence around, defines that there is a single property, there, well, maybe not, but let's say for the sake of simplification, and there are different things happening inside. That for us is a facility. Inside the facility we have installations. Simplest case is a refinery where you have a storage area for input materials, you have different processing units, and then you have storage for output. So all these different parts are installations. Installation parts go down to the level of potentially a chimney or a single storage tank. And these are actually required, depending on legislation, if you need to report emissions versus Series 3 for risk. We have cases where people need to provide this information. We then have the industrial parcel, which is basically an open space inside the facilities, and then the production building, which is this is linked to the building theme, so it uses the same model, but it's specialized on our, say, PF activity. One thing I wanted to stress in terms of requirements, the model does not require to populate all of this. The only really, the basic level of information is the facility described as a point and the type of activity classified according to the NACE code for the description of activities. Below that, it's up to whatever information is available with the provider. So we found in Germany cases where all that information is available to the technical unit part and others where it's not. Some cross-team links, as I already mentioned, agriculture and utilities, inheriting buildings from BU, and then another link I just wanted to mention with mining and energy resources. Those are the resources. The facilities are whatever is extracting those resources or transforming them. Very briefly, the extensions. We have 2 extensions. One called operators and addresses, which is a description of the organizations who are in charge of running the business in the facilities, and the addresses are the actual address class, which is not required in the core but may be needed in some applications which go towards maybe emergency management or other things. The other extension is the production process itself. So if we take a technical unit and again a type of activity, we can in principle with the extension describe quantities which are going in and what is going out. This includes, say, the products and also the emissions, so that then links on the environmental monitoring side or licensing, etc. For those of you who were in Edinburgh last year or followed this in some form, key changes from the previous version are the creation of a core and an extension model. First it was all in one block. This activity complex which we introduced with the other 2 groups, a fuller harmonization with AF for data quality and metadata. No, he said 12. technical unit as a node for utility network, so there's no need to go in details, but the facility can be a node for utilities, and then some simplifications. Conclusions, 2 interesting years, not only from the technical standpoint, but also in general in living a bit inside the Inspire process. Proposal, let's assign some kind of small grant for a PhD or some students to actually estimate the efforts involved in the data specification process, summing the different contributions. This can be an idea to, how do we sustain what comes after? It could be different, but having an idea of what was actually spent, I think, would be interesting to many. And not to forget communication and outreach, because this has been also said in the plenary, but the presentation was made earlier. That's all. This is my contact information, and I thank you for your attention.